launching a tasty pastry. It's a low-carb Pop-Tart. It's got 3 to 4 grams of net carbs, and we love this show. This is our best place to be in LA.
Welcome back to Legendary Foods Muscle in the Morning. I'm Dave Palumbo, and today is Tuesday, June 7th, 2022. And let's find out what's going on in the world of bodybuilding and fitness. In business, people like to say that numbers don't lie. But in the business of bodybuilding, it's more like, well, the photos don't lie. And the numbers just give them context. So here's your number for these new Nick Walker pictures, 295. That's where his off-season weight was at last check-in when these photos were taken, which was a little less than a week ago. And based on the way things have been going, it's probably a safe bet to assume that he's already somewhere north of that number by now. Nick's gone on the record several times over the last few months saying that he believes he has the ability to seriously contend for an Olympia title this year. And whenever you see stuff like this, it makes it hard not to agree with him. But the pictures and the numbers tell a story. And that story is that he's closing the gap. And as long as he keeps inching it closer and closer, it's only a matter of time before he levels the playing field. I don't know if we can go as far as saying that we have true rivalries in bodybuilding right now, but we definitely have our fair share of friendly competitions between Nick Walker and Blessing Awodibu, who both just so happen to be two of the brightest new stars in the sport. Similar to what we saw last year heading into the IFBB New York Pro, Nick and Blessing have been exchanging a few good-natured jabs at each other over the last few weeks, which seems to have gotten some of the keyboard warriors up in arms again. However, unlike last year, the next time we see these two on stage, the stakes will be even higher now that Blessing's managed to secure a place on stage during Olympia weekend. A few years ago, before the whole social media era, stuff like this was actually more common in bodybuilding than you might think, and to a certain extent it probably helped galvanize the fans and the culture. So even though we live in a world now where people love to be outraged and everyone loves to be offended, hopefully something like this will serve as a reminder that it is actually possible to not go crazy if someone says something you don't like. A little bit of back and forth is as good for the fans as that is for the athletes, because at the end of the day, this really is all about entertainment. I'd say over the last 5 or 6 years, we've had a lot of debates about who the strongest bodybuilder in the pro league is. But right now, as far as we're concerned, that title rests solely on the shoulders of Joe Mackey. And I'm not even sure if that's debatable at this point. 2 weeks ago, Joe put on a show at CT Fletcher's Iron Wars where he ripped off an 850-pound deadlift in front of a packed house, which would be impressive enough in its own right, even if he didn't come out on the record a few days ago and say that he still had plans of trying to secure himself an Olympia qualification before the end of the season. Even though he hasn't competed yet this year, Joe is a native of Texas, and the Texas Pro isn't too far off in the distance, which means that there could be a strong possibility that we see him on stage at some point before the end of the summer. Joe's kept himself in relatively good shape so far, so he still might be within striking distance of putting it together in time for Texas. And if he brings the same level of performance on the stage that he does on the deadlift platform, then he's going to be one tough man to beat. If you're not a big believer in the law of attraction stuff, or even if you don't know what it is, I think intrinsically most people can understand the concept of trying to do the right thing day in and day out until you start manifesting some of the things that you really want out of life. So if you just look at these new updates from Hunter Labrada and see the way that he's progressed over the last 2 or 3 years, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to understand that he's staking up wins on a daily basis as far as his bodybuilding career is concerned. This is easily the biggest and leanest that he's been during an off season. And the latest word from his team was that his weight was floating somewhere in the neighborhood of the low 280s, which is pretty significant from where he was at this point last year. In each of the last 2 seasons, we've seen him get better and better each and every time he's gotten on stage. And if he keeps stocking up enough of these small wins, It feels like it's only a matter of time before his name enters the conversation as someone who people see as a legitimate threat to be a top 3 Olympian. And that does it for yet another edition of Muscle in the Morning. I'm Dave Palumbo, reminding you to always be true to your passions, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.